Good evening, Mike. Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Before we do, there were some something that the one people do, and we had to say the open it before we start the meeting. This is a long stage the ugly hat that makes its way around the country. It's not here. Arizona. Prescott, Arizona. Yeah. Okay, well, well, with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Laughter.
Here.
Nemecheck.
Here.
Conklin.
Here.
Moody.
Here.
Medium. Form present.
Well, we're going to do things a little bit different tonight. We have Mike Morphy here from Avon Marsh. He has a commitment at 8 o'clock, and he's made himself available via Zoom to join us in our discussion on Marina. But before we do that, it's Dawn Middleton. Dawn is the new executive assistant to the city of Boyne City. She started Monday, I believe. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I am super excited to be here. Thank you to those of you that have reached out to the park. I appreciate it. That's very warm. Hi, I've been coming to Boyne City since I was born. My grandfather bought property up here and had our old neighborhood, and I get back in the 40s. I've been in the family ever since. I'm fortunate enough now to be here full time. I've been living here full time as a businessman for about a year and a half now. I retired from American Bank and now looking forward to my new journey. Thank you, and super excited to be here and meet all of you. I met some of you, but I haven't met everybody.
Thank you, Dawn. Welcome. Yeah,
Thank you.
great to have you aboard.
Thank you.
All right. Well, so we're going to move right to the discussion on the meeting, and then we'll pick up the agenda, the consent agenda after our discussion. So Mike, I can turn it over to you.
Okay, let me get to the right page on the agenda then, so I can get that up on the screen. At our last city commission meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the marina and how we can go forward with regards to it. The commission asked that we research a number of items, and we've gathered what information we could in the last 2 weeks to share with the commission. I tried to summarize it in a memorandum that went out to the commission today and was posted on our website as well. And we added some of the drawings and aerials that we've seen over the years to help in the discussion if the commission wants it. So I'll just, if the commission would like, I can go through the items that we've gotten information on, report on that. And then we have, as was you mentioned, we have Mike Morphy from Avon Marsh here. If we want to get into some more in-depth discussion with regards to the various options and some of the information he has access to. So one of the items that was talked about was with regards to improvements. There's been the question coming out what would it cost just to basically upgrade and bring up to snuff the existing marina pretty much as it is currently. And Avon Marsh estimates that would cost between $2.2 and $2.7 million to do a rebuild. And that would basically provide for everything except for the fixed docks. And I'm getting a little feedback here, so let me see if I can get rid of that audio. Hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. Okay, I'm gonna turn that down for a sec. Okay, let me get back there. And if not, I'll just continue without it. Okay, so the existing layout, if it was to go forward and be rebuilt, that contains 44 slips. That's a thumbnail sketch, the 2.2 to 2.7 million dollars. And if we were going to rebuild on that, Avon Marsh would, or somebody would need to do a full cost opinion on that to verify those numbers. The expanded layout, which is pretty much what's shown here, but all of Dock B, which is the red one or the orange one up in the top left, that is estimated at this point to be $5.6 million, and that would provide 88 slips plus broadside dockage. So then funding, how would we go about paying for whatever option the city wants to go forward with? At the beginning of this year, we estimated that there's about 284 in the Marina Fund balance. Based on the projections that we had at that time, we were anticipating that to decrease to $111,611 during the fiscal year. But many of those assumptions with regards to the grants that we may have and things of that nature or didn't get would change. So we'd have to basically run those numbers again to see what we anticipate the fund balance to be. If we bonded, and that was one of the options that's been discussed at various times, but if we bonded with no additional slips or sources of income, basically just running on what we have currently, Baker Tilly estimates that based on current or anticipated interest rates of about 5%, that we could bond for about $500,000, all right, raise $500,000 just on the current revenues that we have generated through the marina. And that financing would be on a 20-year payback period. So now if you added additional slips or some other type of revenue, that would increase the bonding capacity. And I see Commissioner Nemetchek has his hand up. So I don't know if there's a question there or.
Yeah. You want to any questions that we go? This in regards to the bonding. So would there be a new public notice and everything? Would there be a new bond that we would have to go?
You would not have to. That you have the bonding authority. Is my understanding with regards to that. I'd have to verify that. We have the authority, and that doesn't expire at any time. The commission, as was discussed previously, depending on how you wanted to guarantee those bonds. The bonds that we advertised for and had the public's notices on, we're assuming that the revenues for it would come from the marina, with the city as the backup for that. If you wanted to pull, basically, change that to what our attorneys had talked about previously, where you basically, like we did for this building, have the ability to levy a millage to guarantee those bonds, just assuming that the revenues fell short at the marina. But if you wanted to be able to adjust the millage rates with regards to it, that one would require or would have the possibility of a vote of the public. Anything else on the funding before I move on or continue on? Since our last meeting, we did have follow-up with staff at the Waterways Commission to kind of find out the status of the existing grants that they have awarded us. The first one, the 2021 Waterways grant for the $392,000 plus, which also both of these grants that I'll be talking from Waterways next do require us to come up with a 50% match for whatever amount of the grant we use. They say that grant remains available. There were some concerns that we might be on a short leash for that and have to make a quick decision with regards to it. They appreciated us reaching out to them and said, as long as we're having open and productive conversations, they don't see any immediate time frame where they have to, drop the axe on us or anything of that nature. So the impression that we got over the conversations with them is they're willing to work with us. But they do have conditions because that grant was issued on a specific application. So they're willing to work with us on specifics, but they felt, at least the initial staff person that we talked to, and this would be all subject to formal review by the state, that they would like to see wave and attenuators extensions incorporated. So the original grant, let me bring up a picture here that might help with that. Hang on a sec.
When you say they would like, is that just like acceptance or is it something they would be required?
I get the impression that it wasn't stated as an absolute, but I think it was a pretty firm. I think they need to see this. So hang on a sec. I lost the screen shot. So
That was the question of Mike. Yeah, last. So 392 we know where, more majority are, but, you know, we've discussed pretty much scrap all that to an extent, and trying to live in this marine base. So none of this can be transferred over to the marine base, all right?
Well, let me finish that in a sec here. Let me just get this up here and I'll focus on answering your question if I could. Okay, the screen's back up. So the area highlighted in blue, it was really with the blue squiggles around it, was what was approved before. They say basically as long as those components are moved somewhere else in the marina, they would consider doing something. So the wave attenuator that's shown there, which is A2, if that one wasn't built and if B wasn't built, they would look for a wave attenuator to be built someplace else, and also some additional dockage to be built someplace else. So I think that answers your question, or goes back to answering your question, Marty, is my charge was to go and find out what is the feedback from the state with regards to the grant. They say the grant's still available, but it can't just be used for rehabbing what we currently have.
And I understand it, and they were very specific at the beginning, but the question last time was basically, you know, so if we're not building this, and this include, you know, these were new splits, but we were redoing this, and this was making some new splits, and even bringing it out a bit further or something on dock E. That was my specific question last time was, can we take some of those monies and put it here? And then if it, you know, if A2 becomes A3,
we didn't look at all the options with them, and that would be something that we could consider further. The discussion that we had with the person we were talking to put out as a hypothetical is if, let's say we got rid of B and we moved those to C, and they were willing to consider that. So based on that reaction, I would say we could go back and ask them again, or come up with a firm proposal that the commission wants. If it did have replacement or additional slips in there, possibly on E, I get the feeling that those might be considered. But I do think that they are going to say that they're going to want to see a wave attenuator extended down to protect any new dockage that we did on C, D, or E. That point came up several times in the conversation that they felt a wave attenuator would really give us longer life, even though longer than what we've acquired so far in future docks, because from certain wave directions, some of those docks take quite a beating. So that's the sense I'm getting from them. Until we submit a formal or revised plan, we're not going to get a firm or formal answer back.
I understand. I would disagree that, I mean, we don't have, I could see A2 becoming A3, but A4 even existing, we very rarely get Southwest.
And those would be discussions that we would have to have with our consultants and the state and all those types of things. I mean, Avonmarsh, one of the requirements early on, back in the early 2000s from the state, was that we do a wave study analysis. And we did have that done, and it was done in 2005, and that's available on our website for people to look at. So the state's going to look at that, and they basically said, whatever investment that you make, the impression I got from them, and again, that's not a final answer, it's an impression, is they want to see better wave attenuation than we have now to protect that investment. Does it have to be exactly what's shown there?
Well, that's what I don't. I'll let you finish your thing. I didn't mean to sidetrack you.
No. I'm just trying to answer your question.
It was the specific question was if we could take the B money and use it, you know,
Elsewhere in the marina?
well, yeah,
Yes.
specifically on E, because that's the only one that we're actually completely, you know, in this scenario would completely we'd be rebuilding and adding a few slips.
Okay, so that's with regards to the 2021 grant. The 2022 grant is still firmly there with regards to that for the emergency utility work. And again, that requires a 50% grant. One of the things that came as a bit of a surprise and I've heard from a couple sources now, is that Waterways does have grants available, grant funding available that would help with just rehabbing the existing marina that we could apply for in the future. So we could apply for something to replace existing docks without an expansion.
Is that part of the spark thing that you highlighted?
No, that's separate. That's kind of like the grants that we've just applied for. We're like when we applied for those last three around the first of the year. That would still come out of, at least it'd be, let me just put it this way, it's eligible to be applied for from the State Waterways Commission. The next grant, and again, I mentioned it on that they have about, whether for all of their granting ability that they do in a year, they have about $3 million a year to work with for any types of grants that they authorize. So that's statewide that they have. That's, they have to spread that across all the grant made marinas across the state of Michigan.
They give you like time frames on when those grants available, application period.
I would assume, my recollection is that that's once a year, and it would be kind of like the same time frame that we were applying. So it would be like the early 2023 would be the deadline. You can always apply for it earlier, but it doesn't help you because they're not going to in a time frame, because they're not going to consider them until they get them all in, and then they go through their ranking and public hearing process and things of that nature.
Mr.
But
Chairman,
again,
that's April 1st is the deadline for that application each year.
Thank you, Mr. Mystery Voice Mike. You threw me. I thought my computer was acting up again.
Sorry.
That's okay. The voice of goodness helps out. Okay, but this gets to, unless somebody has any other questions on that. But then I also heard from a couple sources on this and other projects that the state is rolling out a new grant that goes under the acronym of SPARK. It is a $65 million pot that they're going to be working with of one-time funding available for recreation type improvements across Michigan. And this is using some of the federal stimulus, the COVID dollars, so to speak. The state legislature basically said, okay, we're setting aside the $65 million pot, and basically it's going to be, there's going to be 3 grant cycles, 1 yet this year and 2 next year in 2023. That'll have pots of, they're going to divide the 65 million into a first pot of 15 million, then the other 2 pots of $25 million each. So that's going to be a statewide competition. It is not just limited to marinas, but everything that we have at this point is that marinas are eligible. They don't have all the grant details out. They expect those to be released in September. But that is another source of money that we can apply for the marina or any other recreational improvements that we wanted to do in town. If we wanted to do the open space or something up at Avalanche, whatever the case might be. So just wanted to let you know that.
What is that grant program? You said state, is that like a DNR trust, waterway?
It's not out. It's going to be DNR, is my understanding. It is not restricted to waterways. The person we were talking to from Waterways was saying they wish they had a pot of $65 million versus their $3 million, and that's where they were basically saying, you know, it might be something that we want to take a look at. One of the other points that I should mention that's in the memo that I provided the commission is that there isn't, at least at this point, there isn't any indication that there is a match requirement to apply for those grants. Now, whether those will get you bonus points or something, the devil's in the detail, and we haven't seen the detail yet. But you know, some grants, they don't have any grant match requirement, but you get bonus points if you do provide additional money for them to leverage against. We don't have the specifics yet. Those apparently won't be available until sometime in September. So. Marina rates. We did some checking on that because you may recall that Barb talked to us about having to do that earlier. Currently, the state has not set their rates for the coming season 2023. They expect to have those also in early September. The state is changing their timing of the process and when they're going to be opening marina reservations from what has been October, November, when they were going to open the reservation process. They're pushing it back to January 15th to give communities more time to set their rates and to contact their seasonal slip holders and things of that nature, do some of the background stuff. So we're not going to be under the as extreme a time pressure as was talked before because the state's changing their process. So I think we have, at the very latest, I think you have until the first city commission of January 2023 to set rates. I think we're going to want to do it earlier than that. Probably, I would think no later than December, just to make sure we get all our processes, but it's not anything we have to do today or tomorrow or even in August. So we have some time with regards to that. They've told us that they are doing that, that is a firm for this coming year. Both the time frame for when they're going to issue the rates and then when they're going to open up reservations, which is kind of what gets the ball rolling as to when you have to have your numbers in place. When we were talking to them, I asked for information with regards to the rate structures, and those are included in your packets, and they're available online as well too. And they also gave us a listing of the other marinas in the state with regards to transient rates. And they showed 46 marinas across the state that are on their program. 6 others have rates that are equal to ours for all or part of the season. One of the things you might have noticed on the chart, and I can bring that up here. Give me just a second. Let me close that out. Go back. On the chart that they gave us, we noticed a couple examples of marinas, and the one that's up here right now is like Lake St. Clair Metro Park. And through the year, they have 7 rates that they use at various time frames during the year. So they have lower rates when the traffic isn't as heavy, starting at, and on different marinas. That's kind of why they have so many things here, and on different days and times of the year. So that may be something we want to consider as well too going forward. Yeah. Yes, they do. I can bring that one up. There it is, Charlevoix, right there. Correct. They basically cycle it up from the B rate to the H rate to the I rate, in the higher letter in the alphabet, the higher the rate category. And then they reverse it after August 11th. So their rates will start going down later this week. So anyway, let me get back there. So that's how many. 6 others have rates that are equal to ours, at least during the season. And then there are 7 other marinas, which include Charlevoix, Traverse City's Clinch Park, Grand Haven, Mackinac Island, Muskegon, New Buffalo, and St. Clair, that have rates that are higher than ours. Ours is the F category. So when you're seeing on this schedule G or higher, that's a higher rate schedule, and that was shown on the sheets. That the sheets also had the rate schedule in here. So you'll see we're at rate category F. Then there's a G, H, I, and a J. So we're in the 5th one. So we're just above the middle of the rates for our transient slips. For our seasonal slips, they didn't have a sheet to provide me comparing what other marinas have, so we'd have to do some further research on that if the city commission would like to get that. We're at the rate category 2, and for seasonals, they use numbers instead of letters. And that's the second to the highest rate category. And that sheet's included in the packet as well too, for anybody that wants to take a look at it. So on this sheet, it's kind of the opposite of the other sheet for the transients, where the higher rates were off to your right-hand side. On here, the higher rates are off to the left-hand side, and they have them by boat slip. So for us, compared to us, there's only one higher rate schedule. So for like a 20-foot boat, for a seasonal slip, it would go from $2,040 to $2,200, $160 more per the season. So we're near the top of the seasonal rates. And again, if we wanted to find out who around us charged what, we could go back and do that with regards to it. Any other questions with regards to rates? I kind of tried to incorporate the financials on those things together. Permits. We have 2 permits for the marina expansion. The Army Corps of Engineers permit expires on December 31st of this year. And the permit from the state through Eagle expires a year and a half or so later on May 23rd of 2024. In talking to Mike from Abbenmarsh, he felt it would be fairly simple and direct and probably a good idea. It doesn't hurt us or lock us into anything to apply to the Corps for an extension of their permit to take it to May 23rd, 2024, so that the 2 would expire at the same time. And he has done that. Has submitted that request to the state. Excuse me, to the Army Corps of Engineers, pardon me. And again, that doesn't commit us to anything. It just gives us the option if we want to, rather than let it expire. Depending on what the commission chooses to do going forward on any of these permits, if it's a significant change, we might have to actually go back and get a permit amendment. But again, that's a detail that could be dealt with after the commission decides what course we want to go. Electrical, the power to Dock D remains off. At this point, we can't give a complete report as to what the impact of not having power on Dock D has had to our rental rates, or I mean, into our rental activity at the marina. We'll have a better impact of be able to give you a better sense of that and the financial implications after the summer. Of course, you also have to factor in things, you know, how's this weather compared to last year? How's traffic overall? You'd have to factor all those things in as well too. From a staff perspective, the most immediate need that we have to provide power is to prevent ice forming in the harbor, in the marina this winter. And we usually set up our water movers. People call them bubblers, but it's actually like a propeller at the end of a long shaft, kind of almost like a trolling motor type of thing, and it keeps moving the water around so it doesn't freeze up. But we usually install those depending on what the weather's like in October or early November. I've already had some discussions with our maintenance people with regards to alternate ways, if we had to, if we don't have power on Dock D, other ways to get power from the power panel or some other arrangement that we'd have to get approved by the county to make sure that we could do that safely. That's, from my perspective, that's the most pressing need that we have to get us through the winter season. So and this is kind of a commentary on my part, from my perspective, any repairs and improvements to restore power to Dock D need to consider safety, how will it expected to operate, and cost. Some of the repair options could result in frequent automatic safety system shutdowns. A lot of boats, if they plug in, they might have a small trickle of amperage or something like that, that in and of itself is safe. But if you have, especially on the partial repair system for it, where we don't have individual monitoring at each pedestal, but basically a dock wide or a couple divisions in the dock, if you have a couple boats that leak water or leak current into the water and it comes back, and they could act in a cumulative manner where 2 or 3 boats could be tripping the system all the time. And that could happen in various combinations. And it could happen depending on what appliances the boat is using at a certain time or not. So that's something that we'd have to consider when we're looking at our options for whatever electrical fix we want to do for the system. Again, we have short-term, we got estimates that were provided by Abbott Marsh at the end of May. Based on the inspections that were done with the consultant for them of doing short-term and long-term repairs, and those were about 76,000 and about 343,000 for short or long-term repairs. The long-term would have the more bells and the whistles and the more individual points to break down any current leaks, so you could much better isolate it to a particular watercraft. So those are the items that we were able to gather to you between the last meeting and today. We have Mr. Morphy here to answer any questions on anything that they can help with. And if there's other questions that either I didn't address or you want more detail on, we'd be glad to research them further.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, is there anything you'd like to add to Mike's presentation or any comments that we have?
I just saw that he dropped out and he just asked to be readmitted, so he's coming back on here. Hang on a sec. It's going to take him a sec to connect. Mike, can you hear us? We lost you for a sec.
I'm back. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me, Michael?
Yep.
Mike, is there anything you'd like to add before we get into public comment and questions from the commission?
No, I think the summary was very well done. I appreciate Mr. Kane's summary there, and I'm here to answer questions and help with detail wherever I can do that.
Okay. Well, we could, before we go to citizen comment,
Yeah, can you give us the more details? So my question is, how do you use that grant to upgrade and can, if we bring utilities into a certain point, and 4-phase, 3-phase, whatever we need, from there can it be distributed at a later date? So I guess I just need more detail on electrical and how we use that grant. Pay for it.
Did you hear that, Mike?
I could hear it, but not very well. If Michael could repeat it, his audio is a lot easier to hear.
That's because I'm louder. The question that came from Commissioner Needhammer was looking for more information with regards to electrical. The grant that we received from electrical, if we set up a distribution panel at one location, would that be able to serve the future expansion needs of the marina? Is that a close summary, Tom, or did I miss something? He says that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, with respect to electrical within the marina, the best way to handle it would be to do the work that would serve improvements to the remainder of the marina. So in other words, if we were going to rebuild, D-dock, for instance, and we were going to do some work with maybe a new substation to serve that particular dock, we may want to also build a new main distribution panel to which the other docks would connect when they're rebuilt at some point. So yeah, there's definitely some forward thinking opportunities as you update utilities within the marina. Some of them make sense in the short term and some of them don't, but that's there's a lot of different ways to do it.
So I think spending $75,000 for the short term doesn't make sense to me. It would make more sense than the go towards the 373,000. However, we can do it, including applying that grant to a fair statement.
Did you catch that, Mike?
Yeah, and I would agree. I think as you noted in your memo, Mr. Kane, when You know, if you were to spend 75,000 to try to put a Band-Aid on the utilities on DDOC, I think you're going to end up having all kinds of nuisance shutdowns, because that system will be more sensitive than you know, even most of the boats that are going to plug into it. So to go ahead and to update the system for the long term is going to probably make more sense. Now, the one thing to be careful of is you know, DDOC is well into its lifespan and will need replacement someday. So it makes sense to do the landside distribution equipment, to run new cable and have that system updated, but be aware that at some point, you know, in the next, let's call it decade, hopefully DDOC is on the schedule to be updated.
Mayor. One of the things that kind of ties back to this and kind of links between Marty's comments and Tom's comments is, I think from a staff perspective, aside from the electrical, just from a structural basis, EDOC is probably the most problematic. If you go out there and walk on some of the fingers, they're really pretty tippy with regards to it. And the plans for the marina expansion, when we turned it basically 90 degrees, also called for basically providing electric and water on EDOC like we currently had or previously had on DDOC. So there may be an opportunity as we're using these grants is to look at, you know, is there a way to invest in a new dock with a new power system on E and maybe take a little longer term or maybe push back at possibly DDOC as well too. I mean, because currently all the slips in E do not have power or water. They have nothing. They're just docks. And if we could improve EDOC with water and power, we could potentially use this grant that we have to a fuller extent for a long-term fix, both electrically and structurally. If we could also combine that with relocating some of the attributes that we got funding for B there as well too. So there may be some opportunities there as well too. Again, thinking strategically as how we want to do it. Because again, if you do something like EDOC as was proposed to be extended a little bit, that would potentially bring in additional revenues that could help with other repairs along the way. It might give you a bit of a funding source to work with.
I just want to think, I don't know, can piggyback on what Tom's question was, because part of the problem, Mike, is you can't chase it down. And, you know, so what we've got is a problem that at PDOC with the electrical, and I concur with what Tom said, that the short-term fixes just made no sense, because we're going to spend that money, especially at $75,000. That's what, you know, I would say, and I think there's other options. But as far as having those dollars, you know, spend those dollars ahead of time, the big question is, so how can we know what we're going to have to, right now, the 400 amp service isn't even going to be adequate enough if and when we rebuild DDOC. So, and we're going to be supplying power to EDOC now too. You know, if that's a thought moving forward, and that's what we got to figure out here. You know, can you get that cart before the horse again? I know that we're talking about the land side utilities. The land side utilities, but you know, until we know what we're building or what we're rebuilding, you know, it's just you can't chase it instead. So how can you obviously give us an answer on where we're going to be on power without doing something, and then still when we go move forward, now we've got a good bit of power, but now we're going to have to run, you know, more power back to C and over to E and everything. I try to talk louder. I don't know if you heard me.
Yeah, I could hear all that. And what was the question? I heard a lot. I heard good commentary.
Well, the question was, so, you know, part of the big problem is then, you know, what type of, power. The short-term fix, we're not gonna put in all the power, okay, on the short-term fix. So the short-term fix was trying to work with the, county and just doing the band-aid effect. All right, and that wasn't going to update all that land side. Oh, so the point is that if, I think we got to figure out what we're doing first. And that's why it's so critical to figure out, what we're going to do, if we can use any of these monies, because we still don't have an answer if any of those monies from B can go to E. Well, I know we got the grant to do landside utilities for DDOT, but that's all that says.
Yeah, so the estimate that that we prepared and delivered for long-term utilities to DDOC anticipated looking at the existing layout of DDOC, including improvements to the main distribution, the primary that comes off the pole, and then a new substation near where the gangway meets land at DDOC, and then distributing power throughout the dock to new pedestals. So that's what that estimate considered, I believe. I can check my notes on that, but we were looking at providing long-term power to DDOC. Now, the substation that would be placed on the land side at DDOC could be sized, for instance, for the long-term layout of DDOC. And I know we're not sure what that is today, but we could size it for the layout, for instance, that's been previously designed.
Okay, that was a better answer.
Yes, I do. So I'm curious on the grant. So my thought has been, if we replace we're talking DDOT here, all brand new beginning, like the long straight portion, all brand new with all brand new utilities and electrical, so it's all done right properly. We're not gonna mess with that anymore. But my question is, if we say use, money for this with the grants, but then we looked at rehabbing the finger piers. And I've been talking with Cody Carmichael there.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the location dock systems of the Cedarville. And it looks like that's been a pretty common practice for other marinas to have them come evaluate dock sections and see if they can rehab them. Put new stand underneath and new flotation, so long as they're structurally okay. But do you know, would the grant allow us to spend money on rehabbing finger piers so long as we put a brand new gangway in? Do you know?
Yeah, that would be a question we could certainly ask the waterways. I think the potential to rehab DDOC, for instance, and only address finger piers depends on a couple of things. It depends on the condition of the main pier, and is that a main pier that is worth spending money on the fingers? And does that make sense long term? Then the second question is to waterways, and would that grant apply to, like you mentioned, rehabbing that dock or just replacement of finger piers? So a couple of things that would need to be resolved before I could say that that would be a good way forward.
Okay, thanks.
In general, when you rehab a floating dock, it's a lower life cycle proposition. In other words, you're not going to get the same use out of it as you would a new dock, obviously. So just in general, but how much, that's what we would need to look into in a little more detail.
What would be a comparison? If building new lasts for 25 years and rehabbing lasts. Okay.
Yeah, so exactly. So maybe if you built all new finger piers on DDOC, those finger piers are going to be great for 25 years. But if the main pier only has 5 years of life in it, then that doesn't make much sense. So it's exactly
The opposite. The main pier new and the finger piers being. That's what I'm asking about.
Did you catch that, Mike?
I
George
didn't-
was, yeah, George was talking about flipping it, that where the main pier of D would be replaced and then the fingers would be rehabbed.
Oh,
The
okay, I
other
see.
way around from what you had it.
I see. I think by the time you do that, it makes more sense just to do new finger piers, because you're not gonna, I don't think you're gonna save much. If you're gonna replace the main pier, you might as well replace the fingers. I don't think you're gonna save much to rehab them. It'd be a real small percentage, I think.
He would have to update. I was told, East Jordan's done several seasons where they set money aside and they had maybe 4 finger piers rehabbed every year or every other year, and I think it's $5,000 or $6,000 they have, maybe 4 of them they have. Brand new and functional and done.
Now, I should mention that with regards to that, Barb had talked to Cody as well too from Flotation Docks, because some of the finger piers on E are pretty problematic. And he was estimated in April of this year, I think it was, about $6,000 to $7,000 each to reskin or to rehab per finger pier was my understanding. So, and I'm trying to think on EDOC if there's like 4 or 5 fingers that we'd have on that. So, but again, he had all sorts of caveats with regards to that too, because we have done some reskinning of those in the past that he'd really have to do an assessment to see if the wood was strong enough to actually support, to make it a worthwhile investment and try and give you an estimate as to what life cycle you might get out of it.
That was pretty much what your friends know. I guess the big question on that is, yeah, that sounds at face value quite reasonable, quite a reasonable option, especially when you're talking about the number of them that we have there, and if it's even if it's half the lifespan, I think it's a viable option that we need to look at. I really do. And even if it's a third, I think almost at those numbers, at the numbers that you just quoted. So, which is kind of similar with your article saying.
Yeah, Mike, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is pretty direct. In the last meeting, my question or my interest in knowing if Arbin Mosh can increase slip capacity in the current footprint, is that something Arbin Mosh you feel is possible? Yes or no?
To increase the number of slips within the footprint?
Yeah, the current footprint, we have 44 slips. So prior to December of 2021, we were told that we could not increase slip capacity with the design, and the design couldn't be changed. We found out later down the road that the design can be changed on the grant application process. And that is the December 8th timeline when you guys did a alternative draft. You minus 16 slips on dock B, you plus 9 slips on dock A and C, you plus 8 slips on dock E. So with the designs, with the current footprint, could you increase slip capacity from 44 by 1 or any at all?
The limiting factor there is the location of the existing floating breakwaters. So obviously the proposed breakwater is out further than the existing ones, which buys you more space, which allows you more slips. And that plan that you're referring to from December did accommodate reducing B-dock to get those slips into the same original layout. Could we fit more in there? Potentially. I could look at it and see if there's other places to squeeze a slip or two in different spots. But it probably won't be all 16 of the B-dock slips that could be accommodated in the eastern portion of the marina.
Okay, my next question for you, Mike, with the electrical and the electrical repairs that we need to get done as soon as possible. One of the questions that I've asked consistently is knowing some data, some financial numeric values as far as if we chose option A of $76,000 for minimal repairs, how much do we recoup in those expenses down the road? Out of $76,000 we spend right now, will we be facing another $5,000 in repeated expenses or another $70,000 in repeated expenses? To go further with that, if I made a decision right now as a commissioner to spend $343,000, how much of that would be a repeated expense down the road? Would I be facing another $5,000 of a repeated expense, or something along the lines of $300,000? That's still not a number that I've been able to be seeing or had to make a decision off on what option would be better.
Sure. Good questions. The $75,000 option, which is, I mean, that's a lot of money, and it's almost a Band-Aid solution. It was looking at it early in the season, and can we get this functional at some point during the 2022 season? So really a Band-Aid to get something functional in there. It would have the same purpose, you know, for 2023 if that option were pursued, but I would not plan on using that any longer than a year. And I think you're going to find that solution's, again, not a great functional solution. As far as what would need to get rebuilt out of that 75,000, if you were to say replace the dock or look at a long-term solution, that 75,000 is basically going to be, you know, wasted money. You're not going to really get much of that equipment back. In other words, none of that material is going to really be significantly reusable. In terms of the longer term option, I think it was 340 something. Most of that equipment would be reusable in that the substation on the land side and the land side improvements would be reusable. The foreseeable new pedestals that would be put on the dock would be reusable, even if the dock were replaced in the future. The one thing in talking with HED, our electrical sub-consultant, is likely the cable would need to be replaced at the point that D-dock were replaced. So I don't have a number on that, but just off the top of my head, is my guess is that's probably a $75,000 to $100,000 recabling type of operation. And that's just a rough number, but I can ask that question for more detail.
Would you please do that and follow up with me?
Sure.
Okay. Commissioner, anything else? We should focus now on
I got a few questions for him.
okay, so we'll move to citizens' comment. We're limited to 5 minutes, but maybe you could shorten this a little bit. Might be kind of leaving this here shortly. State your name and address, and we can open it.
Hi, I'm Sandy Pritchard, 5.6 East Lincoln. Yes, chasing in circles. I'm sorry, I don't think I'm gonna be able to be shorter than 5 minutes. It's all coming down to money, and I was just doing some math. Talk about a $500,000 bond, a $392,000 grant, $327,000 grant, and that gives you below the mill. We have to match that. That's 196 and 165 respectively to get to 361. We think we have 111, possibly, probably not with the lost revenues. So we're short 250 from the general fund, which we would need to come up with. I'm sorry, rephrase that. We have to come up from the general fund. So 250 from the general fund and another $1.5 million to do the whole rebuild. I don't have that kind of money right now. So where my brain goes is, if we're going to have to come up with $250,000 anyway, then we move on the electrical. And the grant was emergency, and it is to do all that's needed. I hope it's sized for the future, plus the water from the street. So that to me is another book. The sticky part So to me, you need to do something, and it would be nice to proceed with the grant from the state. But if you can't, go ahead. Because you keep in mind, they've said, and I don't know who, Mike, I don't know if you would let me know who you talked to at the reservations system, because anyway, I'd be curious to know. They said previously that we had to take the 390, decide on the 392 before they give us the 327. So I'm going to come back to Evan Marsh and say the existing footprint isn't A3, A4 as is here. If they want an attenuator, then an attenuator can be within line of the floating ones that are today. So back to Tim's question, what can be done inside that area? We might not be able to use the 392, but we can move forward. We can move forward. Get a design, get a dollar value on it. Begin to do dock by dock by dock. But go ahead and move on the properly sized electrical and maybe abandon the 392 because we don't necessarily have the other money in the budget anyway. On the rates, I'm sorry, but you do need to deal with that in September, which doesn't have anything to do with Mike, because they have to load it to the system. And we clearly, Charlevoix goes from H to I, as was pointed out. Traverse City goes to G. We need to raise our rates, particularly in high season. And we're going to have to go negotiate for that. So it's going to take time. Plus, they need time for their process to load it to the reservation system. I can't believe we don't know what other marinas charge for their seasonal rates. This was a question that all of you guys raised in the budget sessions in April. What are other cities charging? And we didn't know then, and we don't know now. We don't know. There was no action on finding out from local electricians what they think could be done on a short-term basis for Dock D. I think we should be able to know what the current flash is of the revenues for the marina year to date. I'm pretty sure your accounting system could tell us, and we can compare it to where we were a year ago this time. What I heard on the 392 is they want 30 slips plus the attenuator somewhere. It's plain and simple. That's why I'm advocating. Forget the 392. Move forward on the 327 to get the electrical dealt with, and in the meanwhile, replace Dock D, because we're going to have to come up with that money. My opinion. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, this week, just a quick question. Sure. Do we have our answer? Yes, we do. Okay. Interim further is interim, is that correct? Yes. Good chance. Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mike, for participating in our meeting this evening. I'm sure we'll have some further conversation.
Thank you all.
Okay, so.
Thanks, Mike. Mike.
I guess I had a bit of a different perspective, than maybe the rest of you. I hope that the commission is optimistic that we can find a solution for the problem. The key thing was power. That's number one. We were concerned about the permits. We had a good number of permits. So there was a much issue. We gave them spending. There's opportunity for more grant money. We would spark. Grants are $100,000 for $1 million. There's a lot of resources there. My wish when we started this 2 weeks ago was that we come to a point where we can create create time for ourselves and we can navigate and make good decisions. And I feel like we have at least we can. So I think there, I think the other question that we need to resolve in the near future is when we talk about the existing footprint, what that means, what's possible, and we extend compensation is hard. I think that's one key thing we need to discuss before we can go ask anybody any questions about brain injury. That needs to be decided. So, what I think is that we need to have a continued discussion about the footprint, what the footprint means. And have that be a topic of our conversation at our next meeting. We don't get, confused with numbers of this or that or whatever. What would the expansion look like in this department? Is that something we really want, or do we stay in and what's possible? Once we have that decision, then we can do also. So we have the short-term policy. My country what our options are. So I know some of you have been talking with a local expression that something seems feasible out there that can be worked so that we can control that problem.
That's what I got several. I mean, I agree, this is good information. Especially like the grants thing. That one we still, there's no more additional information now versus 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. I was listening on that conversation, and if the intent of what the grant was to expand the marina in some way and to protect what you have, the staff person we talked to was confident that that would be successful.
Okay, because one of my follow-up questions here from 2 weeks ago is 2021 waterways grant for the 392. Does it require increased slips? Yes and no. Have you got that answer yet?
Well, it's not that black and white. It could be in some other sort of thing. I mean, if you want a black and white answer, like, okay, we need to have 3 new slips, I don't think anybody's going to be able to get you that answer.
Right.
If you're looking at the whole and how you achieve something, I think the grant would be applied for that.
Gotcha, because that's something we need black and white in order to go with what you just said as far as what the decision of are we doing an expansion or not. That is a key indication on yay or nay on continuing with the expansion. Do we have additional $392,000 if we increase? If Arvin Mosh even just said it 10 minutes ago, I asked him flat out, hey, you did it back in December of 2021. You increased slips here, you took slips away here. Sound like he hasn't even encountered that question yet. Sound like that was the very first time he's been encountered with a question, can you increase slips in the existing footprint? He's like, well, I don't know. It's something I can look into. I wish he was asked that 2 weeks ago. And so then he could have looked into it over those 2 weeks. So then he could have had an answer response.
Okay. He's not on contract with us, so if we want to engage in services, I mean, that's not why he didn't do it.
Right.
But to Jim's point, and I guess I don't know where you came off that Tom, George, and I and Tim were being negative about this. I apologize. Okay, I'm just trying to find the path forward. I got that, but with that being said, the problem with with the electrical aspect, the D monies, even what Sandy said, well, let's just do this, take the land side grant and do this. The problem is, don't know what we're doing. That was exactly what the contractor said. The electrical contractors are like, well, you're going to put in so many, so many amp box, and the engineer is going to go, no, I need this. So again, you've got the cat chasing the tail. So we've got to figure out what we are going to do. I agree wholeheartedly with Tim's, question
to Mike, and, you know, quite frankly, he didn't have a very good answer, and I understand where you're coming from. That, you know, he's not under contract with us right now for this, but he was, and he redrew this, they redrew this, you know, the way that we asked them to when we went for the all-encompassing grant. So I guess I'm more confused than I was when we started any of this after, you know, his response to that. Well, I don't even know. And I get it that, you know, the attenuators have to be different. I understand that. You know, this one is already here. So going with 3 is, you know, going to give it, and on a different angle, it's going to give a lot of protection to most of that dockage. Because again, we don't have, you know, very rarely do we have southwesterly winds here. So I understand what, you know, Mike, our city manager, was saying about the, you know, the state of Michigan, you know, or the grant, you know, waterways, you know, wanted to protect their grant money, that they don't want to just put stuff in to be destroyed. I get that. I understand that. So, and I'm fine to go your direction, you know, what you're saying, but, you know, the question was kind of, Mike gave a complete different answer than what you just gave on what you guys heard in that meeting. You know, his was, you know, that, you know, it's right here, it's in his memo about taking those monies and, you know, swapping it out. There isn't a, you know, I'm not saying either of you said that it could be done, but it's much more vague in Mike's response than yours. And I'm not trying to argue with either of you. It's the fact that we got to know something. Well, here, right here it is. Well, here's what Mike read. The existing 392,000 waterways grant for 2021, 50% match required, remains available and no immediate risk of loss as long as the communication remains open. Our waterway staff indicated willingness to work with the city on adjusting the specifics of the improvements as long as they incorporated wave attenuator extensions. Okay, got that. So once again, where I pointed, if we went with A3, you know, and swap that over from A2. But the big stop, dock utility upgrades, recloaded and relocating additional slips, that was, you know, that was where the wheels stopped. So again, we don't know, you know, we can use $392,000 for sure for A3 attenuator, but that's about the only guarantee that we got.
I don't think we're gonna do.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they're going to be flexible. Until there's something for them specifically to review, it's hard for them to say yes or no.
So you have the luxury of communicating with this individual at Waterways.
I did.
Because I have not had that luxury. And it's a very different.
Just a second, because we knew there was gonna be questions, and she wasn't available today, that she could be available at another meeting to answer any questions commission.
Okay,
That's what we did.
okay, because I feel like every single one of my talking points in the last meeting is not carrying over whatsoever. And this information or the answers that we've gotten. I remember specifically talking about how the attorneys were saying this as far as one thing and the balance and that, and we found something else out, and then we were told designs can't change, we found that out. So I want to go to not a third party, the direct individual, and no, can you increase slip on current foot capacity? No, maybe a different engineering company. That's quote unquote what I said. And then on the other thing, as far as the electrical, getting some numbers, what's repeated expenses? Still don't have it. And then the other thing, as far as the waterways grant, so yes or no, it's, you know, we're talking, this confuses it even more. It makes it even more complicated, more confusing when you start talking about, well, we're going to have to swap A2 for A3. Possibly that's the feeling that I'm getting. We don't know. It's not a requirement, but it's a feeling that I'm getting. At some point in time, we're spending $392,000. Where do we get a yes or no? Not a what if, and not a maybe, possibly, so on and so forth. We need to know that information to make a good judgment call.
It's a state of Michigan, you know,
Well, to an extent, but this makes it even more interesting right here. The Waterways Commission does have grants available that help fund just rehabbing the existing marina. They're given $3 million per year to dish out those grants. To me, that's opening it up as potentially that, no, not, because I've been communicated to for 9 months that waterways grants are only for new expanding construction. 10 minutes ago, I learned that's not true once again. So do we have the flexibility? Because you're talking about flexibility on the 392. So is the flexibility of being able to use that if we can increase slip capacity to 5 by 6 by 8 in the current footprint? Is that an option? Yes or no? That's, I don't know how to reword it meeting to meeting to get the same result.
You are asking questions that are gonna require time to really dig into it, so that we make the right decision.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that we have to learn the information, that something is not staring us in the face, that we have to make a decision. So we're gonna have time to work through all those sorts of things. That's what I was trying to communicate. That we're not under the gun, that you're gonna have every opportunity to ask those questions that you need answers to. And we don't need to make a decision right now and risk losing it.
Yeah, there's no way to make a decision.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have the
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. We can get power from the league. We can, fix that, however that we get fixed. That gives us time to work through all these sorts of things, to discover any sort of things, what kind of revenue projection, what is a spark grant, what can actually come together.
Right.
We have the opportunity now to have time to make those decisions.
Right. I wouldn't even look at the spark because you're going to confuse it more in my opinion. But another question from 2 weeks ago, a conversation that I consistently brought up was the Arvin Mosh and what repeated expenses was. And right under that is the conversation I was having in regards to, is a local contractor viable? Are they interested? Do we go out for a bid?
That's it. That's my question.
So
my question.
we need more time on the electrical aspect then too.
For short-term things, yeah. Yes.
Well, yeah, that's what it might be. Well, but that's
Here's what I suggest. I suggest that we, the 5 of us, come to an agreement as to what our vision is. And for example, my vision is that we follow up with the attenuators within the footprint. We follow up with as much expansion as we can get. We follow up with what do you call it, well forbid electrical. But we have to come to that agreement. That's my vision, is that we can accomplish this. We need to find a direction. My direction is, and Tim, we're not going to get those 5-point answers from the state. We're not going to do it. But if on paper, we hire a contractor to give us Marty, exactly what you and Mark came up with. You came up with a pretty darn good floor plan. I call it floor plan, but it's footprint in the waterway. It's pretty darn good. We use that as a starting point, as our vision. With that, we have that footprint that we can plot and get the engineered drawings that we need. With that being said, they give us advice. Well, you can get rid of this, or do this, or they will give us advice. That's why they're the engineers and the architects. I think we have to move on the electrical. I don't care how you do it, if it's somehow get bids out there and show us in our specific point is this electrical has to fit the needs for everything within this footprint. Electrical is all 80 slips or 44 slips. That has to be big enough. We spend that money so that by next spring we have a step forward. But I think we're almost saying the same thing. You're asking for very specific questions that we can't do yet because we don't have that vision. And if we come together with a vision, we can give our hired people engineers, the architects, the electrical contractors, and Gavin Marsh and everybody else who's involved, we can give them a print vision of where we want to get. That's rational.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what needs to happen. In my opinion, the electrical, we need to go out for bids ASAP. Put the local contractor thing, validate it and validate it. Put it to bed. If there's local contractors that can do it, put a stamp, we're gonna know once we go out for the bids. So let's get that done. Out of the 370 or the $300,000, he's gonna follow up with me. I hope he does. It would probably be 1 out of 10 times that someone said they would and they did. Even George asked last meeting, the county inspector that basically said, we're not up to code. Can he come and talk? Then Marty said he probably can't come and talk, but can he? Basically, he's the one that said you're not up to code. I don't know what that code is. You don't, the 5 of us don't. So someone needs to tell us and communicate, this is what you need to do to get up to code. Then we can begin the bid process of, hey, this is what we need done, local contractors, so then they know what they're actually bidding on. And then we will know the answer to the local thing, the specific answer. Waterways grant thing. Everyone keeps making a comment that the state can't give you a yes or no. If you go to the waterways grant, whatever point of contact that you've been communicated to them, I see a very valid solution. Go to them and say, hey, if we don't want to increase any slip count, we want to stay with the same capacity, can we get this grant? They're gonna say yay, or they're going to say nay.
Well, we did give an indication to you and to Mike that they'll work with us, but it won't be, there has to be expansion involved, and there has to be the generators involved. But that was the answer they gave, so let's use those tools to start coming up with that design, with that vision.
Back to the electric for a second. I can answer your question specifically. Tim. Kevin has, that's still on the local contract. The problem is that's why I keep saying it's the catch Jason. Okay, until we know what we're doing with DDOT, it's if you go with the simple fix, okay, all that's doing is you're gonna redo some of that landside power and you're gonna get power to DDOT. All right, and then all that's going to do until you know what exactly you're going to put, until you're going to put everything in that you're going to feed for your new marina, then all the stuff, all the infrastructure in DDOT is going to be, and if you were to spend the money, that's where the big money comes in. If you spend $300,000 required for DDOT, can't use it. That's the problem. Those are, those are all stages and all that. So, we got to figure out if George's plan is going to work, as far as, but the rehab aspect, or, because as far as the electrical, okay, none of it can stay the way that it is. And the problem is, the mandate is to bring the power over there, all right, and flip the switch. And here's what they've all said, is that, look, you got 50-50 chance that it's gonna work. So it's gonna be a heck of a lot cheaper. There's gonna be, 15 grand to get power to DDOT and see if it's gonna work. But the problem is, it's all in the dock, all right? He said, if there's any of those that even have moisture, they're going to trip. And that's the problem. What we have down there is we don't have the GFCIs. So that's where I keep saying it's the catch Jason potato. So I have no problem agreeing to spending money for the electrical, for DDOT or anything else with the grant. It's got to be done. I agree with that. But we got to figure out where we're going with it, because you're still not going to have power to DDOT. You're going to have landside power. We get landside power and all stand and cheer. Go, hey, there's power right over here. You all got a bunch of extension points. We help. Other than that, it's got no power to DDOT.
Okay, back to vision. My vision is that DDOT has power. My vision is that DDOT has power. My vision is that we extend the generators. My vision is that we expand from 44 to however much My vision is that we have this drawn up soon. Along with that comes a price tag.
I was gonna say your vision is.
No, it's exactly what Mark came up with.
I know, but they already behind that.
But if-
Now we've got a chance maybe at some other things when we sell the other side. I'm getting.
Well, they deny that, and then they also say, here's more grants to apply for, and here's what we haven't had, Marty, is a very specific footprint. I'm saying, I think that us five could come up with a very specific footprint. And you're right there, but including, so you're saying this electrical, we're chasing tail, no, I say we supply new electric to E and D. We have, and so
So we want it, we got it.
Could I ask a question when you say that? Are we talking about having it look like that when you say footprint?
It's a,
yes,
Mike is blueberry.
blueberry.
So
Well,
it's include the expansion.
Well, that's what Tom's saying.
that's a fair question because
Well, that's
right now,
exactly.
right now, that's a little bit bigger because the current,
Well, that's not bigger.
that's true. The current attenuators are different than what that shows. I agree.
Right. Well, that and this. So you got the T-dot.
Right.
So everybody else can see. Yeah. But, so this is the one that, you know, Mike, you were kind of saying that it sounded like they would let us swap dollars for this. Now, to Tim's point, you know, this one could be swung a little bit and still, and maybe CDOC doesn't come out as far. And now you're in your marina basin, if you will. And I think this is overkill. And I think we could get to that point that that's probably overkill. Again, because of the southwest winds. I get all this. This is where your pounding comes through. And then he's protected by D anyhow. That's why I was saying it, you know, at the last meeting, I was like, you know, can we focus on asking, you know, the waterways to say, okay, if we rebuild EDOC and add slips, quote unquote, because that's what we were doing with EDOC anyhow. And you've got A3, and even if you brought it at a different angle. But
Those are not overwhelming questions. I agree with you, Mike, but that has to be solved. You just said so too, that we need to have a community discussion as to what is defined as the footprint. But I don't think this is overwhelming. I think we schedule, we want meetings and we solve that. But I think logically, we can, just like it shows there, there's a slightly bigger, maybe 10% bigger, that allows us expansion. Expansion allows us more revenue allows us more able to pay the difference.
So we know this is here.
And
We know this is here. Why can't the five of us say this is the existing footprint?
well, because it's not.
It's not.
No, that's what I'm saying is doing another public meeting, going further down the road. So if we could sit here right now and say
Why can't we
immediately,
and say that this
immediately that it's not. So there, we just answered the answer. It's not the existing footprint. So what is the existing footprint?
Well, the existing footprint right here and right here.
44 slips.
Basically, yeah. So it's, you got this wall here, you got the T-Doc here. And there, right?
environment, we do need to protect the southwest. So,
Well, twice a year, I mean, and, you know, that's my point, is that.
Okay, so we pretty well, to a point here where we need to make some kind of decision. I want to move forward. I suggested that I'm optimistic that once we kind of decide on what plan, footprint we're looking at, we can get together and get a plan together and move forward with that. So feeling good that we don't have to worry about the permit. We have good opportunities. We have good opportunities and grants. If we have to pay for it, no matter what we do, even if we do the existing footprint, we're still looking at a cost of over $3 million, and, you know, phasing that. It's going to be complicated. So, kind of at a loss, what else I can say to bring this to a consensus here.
So, I mean, basically where I'm at with it is I like the bonding answer. I like that all the answers except for Mike and the existing footprint question, the question.
How it could be done.
Yup, and the question in regards to the grant and the waterways grant. Those are two things I'm not gonna just give up.
Could you write that down specifically, what the question is on the grants?
Oh, yeah, I got it like that.
Could you share one of them with me?
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yep. And then, so the only other thing is I think right now we need to make a decision on the electrical. As far as the bid process, are we gonna go out for bids? Are we just gonna hash and throw away what we talked about last week as far as looking for local contractors, get an engineer stamp? Can we put that to rest and just go with the Arbin Mosh option?
Well, in order to spend the grant money, you have to get bids.
Right.
Yeah, they're not gonna do it without bids. Period.
Yeah, I think we can get the bid package together once we decide how many slopes we can power, you know, this whole issue.
Mhm.
I mean, that's how I see the sequence. Okay, this is what we want. And then what's it gonna take to get power to it? Efficiently. Also,
I agree with you.
and then you take the next step. Okay, this is what it's gonna be, this is what it's gonna cost. Okay, now how are we gonna pay for it?
Mhm.
How are we gonna do that? Maybe that's grants we have to pursue. How we can do the bond thing again. We can do all, you know, we can just refresh and then we can run it some ways.
Right. The electrical thing is the only thing that's time sensitive to the water, the icing, and the.
Well, with the bubblers, yeah.
That's already figured out. Yeah, because that's gonna, they can go, and run them off the, so the worst thing we gotta figure out there is if our bubblers, will withstand the, GFCI. But on the same token, so there's your simple fix, Tim. If none of them would work, there, and I'm not saying we don't like the bubblers just for nothing, but you know, as they drop them in the water and throw them on GFCIs, it will know that they'll work on GFCIs. If they won't, they're about $500 to replace. Well, we only got a dozen of them in there, so $6 grand is a lot different than hurrying up and spending money to power the dock, to power the bubblers and everything like that. So that one you can wipe off your checklist.
So then we're back at ground zero. The next step is figuring out footprint size and what the direction going forward on what the marine's gonna look like.
Yeah, and I think we've had enough discussion that we're kind of, you know, the funnel's getting, narrow.
Yeah.
That's what I'm.
Yeah.
I would agree. And one thing, the electrical infrastructure. I'm a professional opinion, but it's going to be very similar in cost, whether you're meeting 40 slips, 50 slips, or 60 slips. So it's very similar, because you're coming in with underground, high phase, electrical, and so I guess I don't see the urgency, Tim, to have exactly that much price, but I think we still talk to electrical people when you have electrical paperwork done by them. And that's a starting point. You can come up with those electrical.
Well, the big problem is that all that one was 3D on it. Had no bearing on it.
Yeah, the time sensitivity kind of goes away if what he's saying. It's legitimate.
But I would think that would move us to building infrastructure, electrical, that would make it big enough to service EVAC in the future. I don't care if it's 20 years from now.
I understand.
Well, Mike, can we have this on our agenda for our next meeting? And possibly, would you like the grant administrator to come, or are you comfortable with that's not necessary. We have time until we have something more specific to ask.
Yeah,
Back up 1 second.
Yeah.
Can we just say, so I think Tom asked the question, is this board, and then that'll help Mike answer his question. Is this board, so we're in agreement that we're looking at the current Marina Basin, albeit Tom's still talking about the attenuators. The current Marina Basin, and Tim, and, expanding on, if we can expand, squeeze any other slips in there, but the wonderful little cloud of blue is gone. Well, this,
In the yellow section, you're gonna see, is that the same, or is that?
well, this, yeah. All of this, well, this was part of that, or this was, this was part of the power. This. So, right, that's what we're in agreement on. Yes, but all clouded area. Yes. All in agreement?
No.
Tim? No.
I just think that's short vision. We have a T-Doc there for a purpose. But I would compromise and say,
Well, I think you compromised, because you said we're gonna try to live within the Marina Basin.
but part B could be phase 2.
Oh, that could be
A future expansion. I agree with that.
I would call it future area. Sure. I guess, is that a thumbs up or thumbs down, or yeah, thumbs up? You don't care?
Do we need a motion, or are we back and forth there? I'm not sure the motion.
Okay, no, I'm fine. Tom asked the question. I'm just going down,
It's up to you.
See if anybody has any other-
For a motion. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it makes sense that that would be a future expansion. But what if?
What if, wow, we've already been denied this time. This has already been denied. I don't get to what if. We're trying to figure out what.
We were.
Here's the shower.
This is what.
And this one is perfect here. It's a winter shower. The winter is right here. Right after the summer, it's like, that's, yeah, it's perfect right here. I think I got some picture I can show you.
Okay, well, then I guess I'd like to put it in a motion. But then you guys did. Because now we just back up. We're in consensus.
Check us out and say, I don't want to limit ourselves. We need future possible grant money that the city. They. Whatever. Part G would be included. I don't want to give up that option. But I will say that phase 2, future phase 2.
And I'll say I don't want to talk about getting us to where we can be in our existing Marina Basin. And some slips like Tim was talking about, like we talked about, and like proposed.
I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with whatever it is you're deciding for an existing marina basin. And I would almost say, someone should get up and draw it on this board, so we're all looking at the same thing, that there isn't any confusion, I really don't care about it. We have plenty of paper, we can print something else. And maybe use your pink one if you're gonna do that.
We're just up there. I mean, that, Tim and I were.
This is the yellow.
Yeah, that's it.
Mine's not that big.
So, in my opinion, here's what we're talking about. Start back here. Here's our T-Dot.
That's currently there.
Yep, that's currently there. And then coming out here, this is a question mark. And then here's the rest of our Marina Basin.
This connects
So-
right to the Copper's dock. I mean, it's basically.
That's only my version.
Right.
Only one person on this board.
It's on the drawing.
Pardon?
It's on the current drawing.
What's on the current drawing?
Right there. That is the existing footprint.
No, I understand that. This is, all right, let-
That T-dot is part of the.
the existing marina base, I'll rephrase my comment. Existing marina base. So this is our marina base.
I agree with you, because we included a little bit bigger than what the current is. It needs to be bigger because you have to utilize the T-dock out there.
This is not gonna help the situation. It is not what it is not bigger than what we currently have. With the T-dot.
Well, this
coming
is,
out
some
there,
of this is.
with the T-dot, I mean, yeah, there isn't something there, but you're not gonna, there's no way, like, that's part of the marina, you know what I mean? Like, that's, in my opinion, like, if you just took a ruler up there, slapped it down at the tip of that shopper's dock and smacked the tip of that T-dot with a ruler, like, that is your marina base. Yeah, you have incinerator walls or wave break walls inside of that.
There's where the current marina ends. So,
I don't agree with that.
well, that's where it ends. It's right here.
Right, I mean, even here, you have all of these, like,
I understand.
you can't ever go through that wave wall right now, that's right there right now.
Well, if you brought three out, these are going away anyhow.
If you just took a ruler and boom, currently with what we got, is that not the current footprint, in my opinion? I mean, that's my opinion.
Okay, I think I think what we need to do for our next meeting is to have two drawings. One, this is the existing, two, Marty's interpretation or their drawing. And then, so we clearly understand what we're talking about. And then we can have them entertain a motion at that point in time. Just so we know, we can refine it, all those sorts of things, rather than doing what we're doing right
To
now.
Tim's point, there's your.
So is that possible, Mike?
To do,
To have terms renderings, what the existing marina is right now. You know, we're talking about the heart of the basin. What that is. The expansion. Of the extension of some of the docks and the rebuilding. Does that make sense?
what I'm still getting lost on it. Until I know what that footprint is that the commission has, I don't know how to put the rest of the pieces together. Until you folks tell us, here's the area that we're working with, which we're trying to do, and you're trying to give us options, it sounded like.
That's what I'm trying to make sure we can decide. Marty has one interpretation, and I think Kim has a different one of what we're kind of talking about. I just want to make sure when we're looking at something, we're looking at what Kim thinks and what Marty and maybe I.
Well, then what I would encourage the commission is if different people have different footprints, we can provide them all the base drawings to work off of. And then have people, George can put his vision, you can all come up with your 5 different visions. We can put them in a packet and then provide, and then have your discussion. And maybe there's compromises and lines are going to switch.
That was my first thing that I said was the easiest one.
Yeah, the blue.
The blue doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's where we started writing. Yeah. The blue bubble doesn't exist. Everything else is in play.
But again, this is the most important question, I think, because I think everything else kind of, as Hugh was talking about, falls off of that. And even with the TDOT question, Marty, I would ask, okay, so this part is already here. This portion here. Could we put finger docks going in this area?
No, because not without attenuators on that way.
But if the state allowed it.
Oh. Yeah, I would say the biggest the reason is, you just said, talk about it.
Is that good?
We're discussing everything but the blue area. Oh.
So if any commissioner wants any base drawing, because I included about 4 different drawings in the memo that you got this afternoon. If you need some other drawing to work off of that you've seen from Avon-Marsh or anything else, we'll be glad to provide it. And then if you can get that back to myself, Scott and I will put them all in a common format so you can look at them all together. And we could possibly just do overlays on top of each other too, if that helps.
Is there any way to reach out to the public if you tell them that a voter out there or somebody who's
I would basically say that, you know, we advertise that this is what the commission's going to be talking about. And if people have ideas, or once the agenda packet goes out, to come and let us know, get their feedback from that, from those. And if I could say one thing further, until we have that consensus and then can kind of come up with some potential dock layouts of saying, okay, we're going to put slips here or something of that nature, I would think you hold off bringing the person from the state in until that, because I think we're going to have one shot at that person, and the more concrete and the more of a consensus this commission has with regards to something, I think we're going to get firmer answers. We can get it yet, hopefully, a more of a, in her opinion, his opinion, a more of a yes or no answer with regards to it. Because if we're just throwing hypotheticals, all we're going to get is a hypothetical answer, which is what we got so far.
Okay, everyone fine with that? Yes. So we can go back to the beginning of the meeting. So we're at the consent agenda. The purpose of the consent agenda is to expedite the business by bringing non-controversial items together. It's dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that the item or item on the consent agenda is given place at the last item of the new business including full discussion. Such request will automatically be accepted. Item 8, July 26, 2022 regular meeting minutes is presented. Approve the recommendation from the Main Street Board to accept the resignation of Michelle Corbett from the Main Street Board effective August 9, 2022. Approve the recommendation from Mayor Conklin for reappoint Tom Newhammer as the ex officio city commission representative to the planning commission for term which is the elected term of office. So I don't make a motion of the consent agenda as written. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Okay, moving on to citizen comments on non-agenda items.
I'm asking Richard Black, I'm going to thank Commissioner Director for following up on the Alga side, and we're apparently going to get a notice from Harbories in advance. So thank you for that. The next phase of that is the method of public communication. Try and get that out to the people. Hopefully we'll get notice a couple days ahead of time, so maybe the word can spread so people don't put the kids in the lake when it's just been administered. Also wanted to do a big thanks to Parks and Rec. I had a chance or opportunity to go. I used the little beach on Lower Lake Street, and I was there, I don't know, one day last week, and it was pristine. Someone had actually raked the beach besides doing, you know, the waterfront, besides doing everything else. It was lovely. I do also share the question that Jerry asked. We understand and welcome Dawn. That you are the executive, she is the executive assistant to the city manager, but what I am interested to understand is what is the plan for replacing Barb Brooks as the harbor master? So that's my question. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Steve Person, I live at 437 Poplar Street. You guys are gonna think I'm being nitpicky again, but you know, Stiggs seems to have Friday, they stroll streets. They block off a chunk of the parking lot back there. One Friday. This last Friday, they had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and half of Monday, they had that all blocked off. It just seems like you guys are not being fair to other businesses in town. What if somebody in town wanted to be out in the parking lot or down in the road, there's a couple sections to put tables and chairs. Could the city do that to them? Like you guys do? I'm just trying to figure that one out. And over at the parks, by the library, I thought library parking. I'm still trying to figure out what the city's trying to help them do. They want to try and sell their building, which I understand it's their building. But what's the city trying to do for them? And as taxpayers, are we helping pay for their property, trying to sell the property? That was my question.
I don't think the answer is specific.
So my response to that would be the taxpayers are not paying for the city trying, or the library to sell their property. They approach the city with interest, but no taxpayers paying anything. The city's not paying anything for the library's interest in selling their property. And the Sticks parking lot thing, the city commission did not give Sticks permission to utilize a portion of the parking lot this weekend for an event that they had going on. I don't know the name of the event, but I seen it on the chamber newsletter that I get on Thursday. Basically the Main Street program is the one that has let them do that in the past and has let them do it again for some Main Street event or something like that. Same thing with the stroll the streets on Friday. Whenever something like that happens, that's the Main Street making that decision. So if you truly want a response and why that's happening, I think the Main Street would, Jordan Peck with the Main Street would be the one that would be able to give you the best answer, because it's not us making those decisions.
Well, I mean, the commission here said, every parking lot, they're,
Mhm.
so why is somebody overruling you guys? That's my question.
Sticks, that's a special event. There's a form to fill out, and it's a decision made by the city administration whether or not to allow it.
Right.
The city commission would decide if somebody wants to do something special on public property, that was a result of COVID activities that were going on. But as far as a special event like Sticks, there's a form, and they get the city administration signs off on it.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm saying, is Friday they had something going on. Saturday they had nothing going on. Sunday they had something going on until almost 3, and then nothing. They didn't pull the tent thing down until Monday, just before 3 o'clock. And I was just kind of curious of how they can keep getting away with that.
Mike, did you check to see if they would be on?
This is the first I'm hearing that they were up on Monday.
Yeah.
They were supposed to have it down on Sunday.
Well, they were up to almost 3 o'clock on Monday.
Yeah.
We'll have to check on that.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of curious why they did all day Sunday, Monday.
And it's hard,
Particularly how I can raise it.
but if you have an event once in 3 days, it's hard to put kind of, one day and you got a break and you another day to take time for that. It's so.
But I hope those responses, the only reason why I want to give you those responses right now is because you made kind of a comment that potentially we're playing favoritism to one business or not other business. There is an application process. It doesn't go through us. We don't make that decision. So there is no favoritism in reality. That application process is being dealt with a different, different administration office essentially.
Well, I just want to clarify that it's the city manager who does that. Main Street is not in a position of having the authority to approve a special event.
Gotcha.
That's gotta come through the city.
Yep.
So maybe if you could, well, if you would, okay, anyone else? All right, moving on. have correspondence, I don't see any. Okay, city manager report, Mike.
Well, I don't think I lost it.
Here's the copy, Mike.
Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. Last week's state primary election went very smoothly here in Boyne City, and I want to extend congratulations to Jessica and her team for a job well done on that. We had poll watchers in who currently go to different voting locations, and they were giving us feedback that Boyne City was one of the smoothest operations that they saw. So I think that's something to be celebrated. The Lincoln Street reconstruction project continues to move forward well. All underground utilities are now done, as is the vast majority of the concrete work. Paving of the project is expected to begin on Monday, August 22nd, and be completed within a couple of days after that. The project is on track for final completion by the end of this month. Work has resumed on the Rivermouth Pump Station project as more electrical and other supplies have arrived. Consumers Energy is reporting that the new electrical service connections, and these are underground electrical service connections, from River Street, you may have seen their crews out there in the parking lot between Park Street and the Eagles, that those connections may be delayed, and those are necessary to run the new pumps into September, as Consumers Energy is experiencing supply shortages and delays as well. So we are working this week with several downtown businesses that are looking to hold their annual sidewalk sales this Friday and Saturday. At this point, I've only heard of a couple businesses that are actually interested in pursuing it, so it might be kind of a light event. As such, assuming this moves forward, businesses will be setting up their sales on the sidewalks and parking spaces adjacent to their businesses on those days. Pirate Fest moves in to take over Boyne City for their annual festival, and they really start showing up here in town this Thursday through the rest of the weekend. They had some other events last week in the West as well, but those were mainly out of town. The fire department will be holding their annual car show, flea market, and food extravaganza, both downtown and mainly in Veterans Park this weekend. So we can check that out. Because of the activities in Veterans Park this weekend, Saturday's farmers market will be held at Peninsula Beach Park this weekend. So that's making a move. And hopefully you've gone by and taken a look at and seen that the site prep work has begun for the splash pad and the covered shelter in Peninsula Beach Park, and that started last week. So they've got a couple holes dug up. The hole immediately, the circle, I should say, immediately north of the restroom building in Peninsula Beach Park, closest to the volleyball courts, is where the splash pad will be going. We're starting to think about this year's annual Labor Day drag races at the airport. And if anybody's interested in helping out this year, because that's the critical factor, is having enough volunteers, if they'd please contact me or City Hall for more information. I'll be out of the office this Friday. I have a memorial service to attend downstate. If you have questions on these or other items, I'd be glad to try and address them.
Just in regards to ARC funds, does the state come up with more guidance on how municipalities can spend there?
No, we still have, as it was last interpreted, quite a bit of flexibility on how we want to use that.
Just curious, would it be in our interest to offload that before we're applying for like SPART or?
No, I don't think it'll have any impact whatsoever.
Mike, I was wondering about the
my wife would definitely say no. Well, it doesn't take that much time during my working schedule. It's during the Labor Day weekend itself. I always lose that Saturday and that Sunday of the event. But it's always been a good event to put on in the community. Once the police gave it up, they struggled for a leader, and I jumped in to help out. mean, if somebody else would like to take it over, I'd be glad to help them transition into it. But again, I think there's a lot of people in town that really appreciate that event, and it's another variety of event for people in the community. So I'm inclined to keep it going. It would be nice to hand it off, but thank you.
I think it's a great event, but it's just that if you're the one who has to be it's a game changer to me.
Yes.
And the other thing, I knew people were being installed around like downtown and Eagle.
Cable.
Like there.
That is the what you saw over by the Eagles is the new electrical service for the pump house, where they had the banners up saying shoulder work ahead, kind of down by Marty's place by the bridge, and then coming this way there. So the orange cable that they're putting underground from basically the corner at the Eagles back to the middle of the parking lot by where the old Fochman building used to be. That is the new electrical service that's going to be running the pump house power. The electric's going to be upgraded to it's either 440 or 480 volts.
Later, and come back to the recommendation. And what that that may not involve significant initiatives to integrate these ideas with various commissions, like the Parks and Rec Commission. Does a lot of things that they may be interested in the Parking Commission. So, I'm sure right now, but there's potential. Discussion. Moving on to old business, taking care of that.
Yeah, it's on the agenda. I wonder if there's a comment. See,
Yeah, I think in the future, though, if you have something, we're not going to be individually doing that kind of sports support. I'm happy to do it now, but if you just do it on the citizens' comments.
I guess I don't understand that if it's an agenda item, then why would it be?
Well, I'll
Treat it
make sure to
Interesting. Thank you for bringing up the shoreline protection. These minutes don't reflect what took place in the meeting. The meat of the presentation was to present a scorecard on how, and they're going, this committee is going around to every single township and municipality that's on the border of Lake Charlevoix. And they're reporting out, they're measuring progress against the 3-year-long program that Tom participated in and some others. All those municipalities came together to come up with a list of possible ordinances. And they met for 3 years, and they published this in 2019. So they came to the planning commission to present this, and they had done a scorecard, if you will, of Boyne City. And the reaction was quite negative. So I guess I'm alarmed that that's not mentioned in here, nor is there a copy of the scorecard that they gave us. And then I was actually embarrassed for Boyne City because they were placed on the defensive for a product that the municipalities created. This was a product of teamwork for 3 years. And they were given an assignment They were told to come back with what was achievable and attainable, but yet it was achievable and attainable in the minds of some of them anyway, in the minds of the leadership of the local municipalities and cities. So it's a big deal. And we didn't do anything. The idea was there was a list of possible ordinances and nothing has been done. Hence, we now have 2 houses between the road on Bay Street, between the road and the lake with no setback. And there's no ordinances preventing them. And that whole strip along there is residential. And barring any ordinances, they're going to continue to do that. That's just one example. These people are making a big effort to go around and help and measure. It's not their job to decide what's attainable and achievable. It's our job. So I don't think this accurately represents what took place in that meeting. Thank you. I'd like to see the scorecard amended and added to the meeting minutes specifically.
Okay. Moving on, we have issue the Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund grant and the acceptance resolution for the open space grant. Mike, you start.
Thank you, Mayor. Back in February of 2021, the City Commission authorized the city staff and working with Beckett Creator to prepare and submit a Michigan Detroit Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. The application was prepared by Beckett Creator on a discount basis for the development of phases 1 and 4 of the open space master plan project. Phases 1 and 4 include the 10-foot wide non-ordinance pathways, 2 crosswalks across North Lake Street, 6-foot wide shoreline walkway, nationalized shoreline gardens, street trees, and seeding and landscaping, as outlined on the attached plan. In December 2021, the city was notified from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources that the submitted grant application was recommended for funding. And as of January 2022, the city could begin to incur costs that would qualify for reimbursements from the grant. Qualifying costs include those associated with preparation of plans, specifications, and bid documents. As required by the grant, the city needed to retain the services of a prime professional for the development of those plans, specifications, and bid documents. As previously agreed, Beckett Creator submitted a proposal to the designated prime professional for the project. And on February 8th, 2022, the City Commission approved the contract with Beckett Creator for design and construction services for a lump sum fee of $54,000. The open space pathway plan is referenced in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and scheduled in the 2022 capital improvement plan. The amount requested from the state was $300,000 with $120,000 in matching funds coming from the Parks and Recreation budget. On July 19th, 2022, PA 151 of 2022 was signed by the governor, which appropriated the funds to the Michigan National Resource Trust Fund and to the Department of Natural Resources for reimbursement of through grantees. So the next step in this process is that we need to sign the formal project agreement with the state, and the City Commission has to adopt the resolution in identifying those funds and match funds will be made available. So, with that, I think I can answer these questions.
Thank you, Scott. Any comments?
This is the process. Process going. One question on the application, Scott, says they're going standard verbiage, but number 29 is reads slightly scary.
You want to look at everyone agree? This agreement may be canceled by the department without 30 days notice. So I'm sure it's just normal verbiage, but how many examples do we have?
I've never seen this.
Okay. That's what I wanted to hear. My other question is, in agreeing to this, we already talked about this a little bit, but you know, so are we bound exactly to, if I count all these little circles, we have to put every one of these stupid trees along
The next
the
step,
block
of
of view?
the next step of the process is to develop a plan. Every reader has 6 months to develop that plan. They present, they have public input about the final designs of that plan.
Thank you.
I'm in full support. I'm just curious, do you feel that they're pretty solid on the timeline still, from the timelines that we talked about earlier with back in?
Well, the last I talked with them, the anticipated timeline is they have bid documents ready for the spring.
Yep.
And then construction.
Yeah, next,
In the fall of next year.
yeah, it was fall, wasn't it?
Well, whatever it is, more than agency, the contract.
I'm in complete support as well, so I didn't change the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve approve the recommendation from Planning Director Scott McPherson to approve the grant acceptance resolution for TF 21-0041 Boyne City Open Space Pathway and authorize the city manager and city clerk treasurer to execute any necessary documents.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any further discussion? Jessica, roll call, please.
Lassiter. Nemecheck.
All right,
Johnson. Lucas. Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on, we have the Housing North staffing contract. Consider the recommendation of city manager Michael Keating to approve contract. 2022 contract between Boyne City. I'm not sure what that is there, Mike. So why don't you just start?
Yes. Attached for the City Commission's review and consideration is the proposed second renewal of the contract between Housing North and the City of Boyne City. This one-year contract, along with similar ones that between Housing North and the City of East Jordan, the City of Charlevoix, and Charlevoix County, continue to provide the basic framework and necessary funding to allow for the employment of a housing-ready program director to help address the housing shortage directly here in Charlevoix County. It was the initial intent of all parties involved that this is a minimum 3-year effort, and this would be the 3rd year of that project, and that its successes, hopefully, and progress will encourage us to extend it even further into the future. But that's a discussion for another day. With all that said, the agreement as proposed, which is the same agreement that we've seen in the first 2 years, does provide each party a 30-day opt-out option. The Housing Ready Program Director is hired by Housing North, who is ultimately responsible for that person. Up until last month, that person was Steve Schnell. With his resignation, Housing North has been searching for a replacement and is in the process of scheduling interviews. It's anticipated that the new person will continue to closely work with and receive direction from each of the sponsoring communities, which are basically Boyne City, East Jordan, Charlevoix, and the county. Ultimately, if there are any issues that cannot be worked out between the communities and the program director, Housing North will be available to resolve the matter. The city share for this joint venture is expected to be a maximum of $9,250, as specified in Article 5 of the agreement. The contract and annual cost have not changed since we began this effort in 2020. These funds have been included and are contained in the budget for the current fiscal year. Should any significant increase occur, and there has never been an increase in the contract during any of the previous 2 years, it would come back before the City Commission for further review and consideration. Challenges with COVID, the supply chain issues, material and housing price increases have slowed progress, but the groundwork that has been laid to date should continue to bear fruit. like the East Main Street efforts that to build 5 houses that the commission acted on at our last meeting. I'm confident that by continuing this joint effort with our neighboring communities, we will continue to make progress on the city commission's goal and an urgent area need. So it's a recommendation that the city commission approve the contract for the coming year, labeled BCHR, between the city of Boyne City and Housing North, and that's code that they used in the document. As presented for the provision of staff services at a cost not to exceed $9,250, and to authorize myself and the city clerk treasurers to execute the agreement.
Yeah, I would say that, I respectfully, disagree. I don't believe it has been. I would rather take this $9,000 and give it to Jane and her. I think that's more, where we've got, fruit from. And, I think that, I think the housing north thing, has been, just a middleman aspect, if you will. Nothing against Steve Snow. I just don't think that, I'm not there. I'll cut to the chase. I don't waste any more of your time.
This is where I'm at with it. Steve Schnell, I know the grants that he helped secure. I do see a value in it. Steve Schnell is not there anymore. And it's not, I am in favor of Steve Schnell, but I am not in favor of spending the $9,250 on an individual that doesn't exist. This is for their staffing program and for this individual in that position. Now, it would be great to have a representative here from Housing North, so then I can ask questions in regards to where they at in filling that position, kind of how do they feel about their candidates? Do they have a lot of candidates? Are we expecting to pay this $9,250 and have an individual in that role next week, in 3 months, in 4 months? So for me to spend $9,250 without on a program for an individual that currently there's no one in that position, I don't see an ROI in that expense for this 3rd year. Just because 1, the representative ain't here to answer any questions, and 2, we don't know when this position is going to be filled. So with that being said, that's why I'm not in favor of it. Now, that's a little different than Marty's opinion. But I do agree with this $9,000 to be spent directly, not in this housing solution option, but another housing solution option, because that's something that I committed myself to and I put out there in the campaign as far as working on any and all housing solution options. So specifically with this, without there being an individual in that role, I can't favor it, but I do favor, like Marty said, spending that $9,000 somewhere else for housing solutions.
Okay. I respectfully disagree. I think the $9,000 you completely paying for your dollar. There's nobody else that can put in hours, takes on the red tape of the government. Housing is a regional issue, and for us to be cooperative with the other 4 entities, Jordan, Charlotte, nation, it's just an incredible, efficient way to get a professional person working on issues that are affecting us all. It's $9,000. It's well spent. There's nobody else. Mike doesn't have the time to put in what Steve did, nor does Beth, nor does Jane, nor does anybody else understand. This is a specifically highly skilled person who is trying to solve all the bureaucracy and work together. Your issue that it's, it reads not to exceed 9,000. Nobody's heard of it concept. should be prorated. That money's not being spent right now because we don't have some spot. So therefore, no, we're not going to spend $5,000. It's prorated. It's a valuable position. I agree. The day we hired Steve was the day the nation shut down with COVID. So he was from the beginning, hamstrung. It's just a great investment, and it's going to pay off. Yes, pay off. You could not get 9 times. It's a lot more than that to get a professional person working 4 hours a week plus. Solution.
Is that true that it is prorated?
I do not know that to be the case one way or the
Like
other.
validate that?
Honestly,
Okay.
you're not going to pay someone to say.
I will add though, the only other homework I did on the subject is I reached out to Charlie Boyd and East Jordan to see if they renewed their contract or if they were going to renew their contract as well. I spoke with Tom this afternoon and he said unfortunately they did renew their contract about a month before Steve Schnell resigned, and he said they probably would not have made that decision knowing Steve Schnell was going to resign because he doesn't see an ROI in anything that they'll be getting this year out of that. So that's the only other homework I did.
Yeah, I've probably been in 15 meetings with Steve and Mike Henkel and Jane. And really working behind the scenes and making progress. There is things being done. Yeah, so Steve was top notch. It's unfortunate, but you can't assume, and Jordan may have assumed that we're not going to replace that person, which is very well person. I should go with there's someone that's equal or better than the person in the left. So I have confidence that they will hire someone for a position. Momentum.
My question, the contract that was provided us was signed in March.
Yes.
17th. So are this going to start then?
Yes.
So we're already 6 months into it?
Yes.
Was that just an oversight?
No, just other items that we had on the agenda.
So I think it's important, this is a 3-year program, and we can evaluate all these questions to make sure that we doing it at the same questions that we had. And I think it's important to support this 3rd-year regime, because it's very young, and no one's even doing the application, figuring out this and going on, you know, what might she do? This is a real cooperative effort with the store, Cheryl, myself, Cheryl, Foundation, and their partnership with the
Fry Foundation.
So I've shared concerns with them. I would say one that I think it's important for us to say about experience and just give them a very thorough evaluation of what we've done. So I would hope that we support this. With that, I entertain a motion.
I guess I'll make a motion, try and meet in the middle. I'll make a motion that we table this and postpone this, until consideration once they fill that employment position. So it doesn't get shut down right now, there's possibility down the road. So that's my motion.
That's it. Could you repeat the motion?
My motion is that we postpone and table this until at the very least Housing North fulfills that role. And then it comes back to us once that role is fulfilled and they fill that staff need. That way this is not killed right here and it potentially lives on down the road.
We had a discussion.
That's just not fair to Northern, North. I mean, they're saying we need to hire someone, but Boyne City may or may not be in it because they have to check out the person first, and we're not going to, we may not be able to get monies or build a salary for this person. That's not fair to them. What's our goal? Increase home availability. We're not willing to spend $9,000 for a full-time person to attack this problem. The city, we've said for years, housing is our number one issue. And
I don't want to go back and forth, but if your speculation of them prorating this $9,000 on the staffing need, I don't see how you wouldn't favor the motion that I just made. Because basically, once they meet that staffing need, it would be prorated according to your speculation.
because you're throwing doubt. How's it going? You're saying, well, we may or may not get there depending on who you hire and when you hire them. That's not perfect fair to them when they're depending on our $9,000 to fulfill a
Prorated,
professional contract.
prorated.
And the city's prorated.
Right.
It's more fair than just saying no now. I was gonna go Jim's direction like with Hughes County. And I agree. I would love to have Jane here and say, you know, tell us where this falls. You know,
But
So I wonder, kind of getting here again, would we have a possibility to have somebody from Housing North here in 2 weeks? So we can discuss this with them.
Maybe see the Zoom, I'm not sure the executive directors and privacy.
I wouldn't be surprised if she'd be willing to come up.
she was just at the Economical Development Corporation.
Yep.
Yeah, it was on the plan. Yeah.
We'd have to check what her availability is, but I wouldn't see that she'd have a problem coming to a future meeting.
I just don't want to pay, it could be 6 months. It could be 7 months for them to fill that. And to pay the full price tag, if it's prorated, I mean, that's exactly, you would have to reach you can't say it's prorated and then say it's the servicing Housing North because they're not getting the full $9,000. Because you're directly contradicting, you know, both sides of the fence that kind of.
Well,
Mayor?
I'd like to make that before, this is the cooperative effort, so we're telling them, you're not guaranteed having our $9,000 when you go to negotiate contracts or very good for you. So that's the message we're telling Housing North. And I think, 3 years into it, Steve did a great job. They may find someone else who can maybe even walk on water. And I think we just need to be there and there's going to be an opportunity to evaluate. Because everything in New Hampshire doesn't.
Right. And that's why I think it's appropriate to table it until we get the.
Well, we have a motion on the floor. Follow through with that. Did you do the motion?
To postpone and table until after one, so.
Okay, we're in session.
Mayor,
Yes, Mike.
with regards to their hiring process, my understanding is that they're going to be interviewing candidates next week. So I don't know how this would impact their ability to make an offer, but that's their schedule that I'm aware of.
All right, so we'll further discussion. That's a roll call.
I just wondered if something could be added to maybe just postpone this for 2 weeks until we talk about more. That'd be a possibility of motion.
Well, we can vote this motion now.
all that, or like I said, they're probably gonna be negotiating next week, so we may have that answer.
And that's why it's important that they know that the city's on board, so they can negotiate next week with the person who finds that they have a portion of the out here.
I'll retract my motion, so
We've already had the motion. This is second. So how does that get withdrawn?
Well, I think at this point, You have the maker of the motion.
Yeah. I think-
He can either withdraw his motion or he can amend his motion or accept a friendly amendment to his motion.
Right. So my amendment to the motion is to remove fulfilling the staffing and postpone this, bring it up at the next regular scheduled meeting.
The seconder of the motion would have to accept that amendment.
I would,
Okay, we do know.
My motion is to postpone and table this agenda item until the next regular scheduled meeting.
Lester.
Aye.
Tony Chuck.
Aye.
Conklin.
No.
Moody.
Aye.
Deacon.
No.
Okay. Moving on, we have the order.
One quick question, can you recall? Just my question there, keep the diesel, is it working?
Funny you should mention that. We had somebody that complained with regards to geese at Peninsula Beach Park today, which would indicate to me that it is not working, but I wanted to double check with regards to that tomorrow.
Maybe they were just carrying away. Sure.
Well, actually the device is a buoy that is floating out past the swim buoys out of Peninsula Beach. And the circle that it was supposed to have was supposed to include the beach, the lawn, basically up to this splash pad. So based on the call up or the contact that we received today, I have my doubts. Yes, they'd get their $300 back if, I think there's like a 6-month test period.
It's like having I have 2 questions, or comments. I know it's been brought up like Tom before, Tim's brought it up before. I had complaints, I think George, but can we look at some, what we have in place at the pavilion doesn't seem to be working as far as the cleaning. Can we just start charging to have it cleaned or whatever, and it just gets passed on? Or, because the complaints just seem to be getting more frequent, and people just don't seem to care.
Yeah, we had a situation come up over the weekend, which brought that to the head again. And Mike and I were talking about ways to do that. So we can make sure that's potentially properly inspected after somebody's done with the event. And that may involve additional labor costs and maybe some additional charges, but Mike and I talked about that this afternoon, and we're going to come up with some options to see how we can improve the process. Yeah.
Is cleaning deposit an option?
We do have a cleaning deposit, but on this most recent circumstance, we had a person that had it rented on Saturday. They used it until 4 o'clock, but we didn't have anybody come in to say, did they leave it in a clean condition? In the meantime, it's open to the public from 4 o'clock until this group comes in Sunday morning, and people over the weekend left it. People after the other group left it a mess. So those are some issues we got to work our way through. But unfortunately, we're reserving a space that's generally open to the public, and anybody can put a mess in there at any time, and that's what's happening. Went through there this afternoon, and Don and I went through there, and somebody had left watermelon all over the floor. And if somebody had to reserve it, tonight, they would have walked in with watermelon on the floor.
Well, we probably got to revise our contract just to make people understand that, look, if you're renting it early in the morning after, a weekend night or something, there's no guarantee.
Yeah, we got to work our way through that.
My other question was, and this is for Tom and you too. You, Mike, but when was the last time, so we were talking a couple of meetings ago, so we brought up about the road end at the end of John's. And hey, I don't know if we finished repairing that, maybe next Mike knows that. And then the other thing was, can we, because I don't think it's been done in a long time, because I drive to all of them, I've made it a point for years, continually check them out. But can we look into surveying each one of our road ends? I mean, it's nice to hear that Sandy said that, we got, The end of Lake Street, we're taking care of very well, you know, but we got Charlotte Street, we got John Street. We got the end of Main Street, which has been a big point of contention for years. And I mean for years, because the house just keeps trying to say, no, we own this, and they don't. And then we got, you know, Woodland Drive. And, you know, so I mean, we have a lot of them, and I think it's important to protect them. And I, you know, I would like to get those, you know, formally, have them surveyed and make formal monuments, on them, so people understand and know, especially adjacent property owners, mainly for the mission.
That's something we can look into. Yeah. Obviously, there would be costs associated with that. We can get some costs and bring that to the commission at some point.
I'll sit right here and say right now, I'd be willing to make a donation for that cost, because I think it's that important that, you know, they've, there's at least 2 or 3 of them that have been grotesquely abused over the years. And before somebody tries to play the eminent domain card on the city of Boyne City.
We've had the discussions with our attorney on that multiple times, and he's basically advised us that they cannot successfully do that against the city. That, you know, somebody can play that card, but he basically says case law would trump it.
Yeah, you can.
But try to tell that to people, you know, you know, in certain areas that where, you know, someone's got a, you know, few $100 million that they just don't give about. You know, and wants to waste an attorney's money. So
yeah.
That's what I would like to.
You can disappear in such a way that the union over there, in the public building over there.
Exactly.
That's happened.
That's why.
It's happened. Holy Island has happened several places in the county. Really? You know, people have put solid over time of going to vote on it, but in public affairs and screaming all at people when they come to use it, and it's been a mess. There's one in Village of Charlotte, but it won't even exist. It's on the books, but some new law now. That's wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Any motion?
I'll make a motion here. Yeah.
Well, now, sorry. We have our short-term rental work session meeting, next Tuesday at 5:30. I think it's got to be very loud. And then our next regular city commission meeting is scheduled for August 23rd at noon. Now,
Make a motion to adjourn.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
What's it?